On June 26, 1978, Police Officer Albert M. Claggett IV and Police Officer James B. Swart stopped a car in Prince George's County, Maryland. The car matched the suspect description in the theft of laundry room coin boxes from a nearby apartment complex. The suspects were arrested. While processing the suspects, one of the men suddenly ripped Officer Claggett's weapon from his holster and opened fire. Officer Claggett and Officer Swart both succumbed to their injuries, leaving the area community and 2 families shattered.
And one day I said to one of the higher-ups in our department, I said, you have any idea on how Mrs. Claggett's doing? And he goes, she's doing fine. And I said, how do you know she's doing fine? And he says, because on the day we buried her husband, I gave her my business card and said, call if you ever need us, and she's never called. And he was really sold on the fact that she was doing well. Well, she wasn't doing well. She had 2 little babies. She was having a difficult time adjusting. She's dealing with the grief, dealing with the media, dealing with the trauma, dealing with the death. When we go back to Claggett and Swart, that was the catalyst that educated me and pushed me to the point where I realized that we needed to do a heck of a lot more.
Susie became more involved with her Fraternal Order of Police Auxiliary and started working with Trudy Chapman Radley, who shared her heart for doing more for officers and survivors. Together, the founding idea of C.O.P.S was born. The deaths of Swart and Claggett sparked a desire to do more within Susie and Trudy. These 2 became a part of the driving force that created the National Peace Officers Memorial Service in 1982.
1983, some widows showed up, needed to just sit and talk. If you don't meet with other police survivors, you can't talk it out because these other folks responding don't understand. And that eventually turned out to be the miracle of C.O.P.S.
And I remember calling Susie and saying to her, thank you so much for the time that we had together in DC and for bringing me other women that I could connect with. But we really need our own organization. And as Susie and only Susie can say, she yelled, damn, you're right.
Just a year later, 110 survivors gathered at the first Police Survivors Conference and unanimously voted to start C.O.P.S.
Initially, we just needed to have money to get ourselves off the ground. And getting that first grant was huge.
One night, while talking about the organization's need for funding, Susie's mother suggested she call an old family friend, Charlie Lauer, who served as general counsel with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Susie was skeptical, but called Charlie anyway. And just a short while later, the 2 were standing in front of Lois Harrington, the Assistant Attorney General.
After about 15 minutes, Lois Harrington looked at Charlie and said, Charlie, I think we need to fund this. We got $174,000 federal grant, thought we had the world by the tail.
With a base level of funding secured, the organization began to grow. More survivors attended the National Police Survivors Conference. Soon, it became obvious that survivors needed more, and C.O.P.S found a way to deliver something a little different: the hands-on programs.
The first hands-on program was C.O.P.S Kids Camp.
Good morning, Camp Rising!
The first camp we had like 31 people. It's like, oh man, I don't know if this is gonna work.
Kids Camp not only worked, but it began changing lives. The next year, Parents Retreat began.
And it was the widows that said, you know what, we need to do something for the parents of the officers.
Spouses Retreat followed soon after, with siblings and adult children's not far behind. Each year, more survivors begin to trust C.O.P.S to help them heal and find others who understand. During this time, C.O.P.S also created the Traumas of Law Enforcement trainings aimed at helping officers and departments deal with the death of an officer.
It lets everyone see the human side of one another. An officer doesn't have to be 10 foot tall and bulletproof. It's okay for you to come up and talk to me.
In the early 2000s, longtime supporter of cops, Cam Flynn, came to Susie Sawyer with an idea. The Cops Walks became a unique event, a 25-mile challenge with survivors receiving peer support, while also being able to help others by gathering donations to help cops grow. Giving back to other survivors became even more important as our nation faced the horrific tragedy of September 11, 2001. Thousands of people, including a huge number of law enforcement officers, died on 9/11, and hundreds more continue to die from illnesses related to responding to September 11th.
And so then when they started saying that, they knew it was going to affect a lot of lives of law enforcement officers, it got like, what the hell, how do you handle this catastrophe?
I remember looking at the faces of the first responders. It was a hard thing to look at, to see all these people walking around with blank stares on their faces. To know that most people who were on scene working that day had lost a loved one, a colleague, a friend, somebody in that very attack.
I was there for several days and able to hold their hands and pray with them and let them know that, this is the worst of the worst, but we're going to get through it.
With the massive influx of families, the organization quickly faced its largest National Police Week yet.
Leading Police Week in May of 2002, I went into it. There are going to be more people than ever at these events.
September 11th also kicked off a new era, where taking care of our peacekeepers became more and more important, leading to the start of Coworkers Retreat in 2010.
But going to Coworkers, I met people who had been there and they had done that, and they came out on the other side through resiliency and education and training and counseling and all these other things. And once I let the walls down, it literally changed my life.
As National Police Week grew, so did the organizations who planned it together.
It got to the point where there were 3 organizations that were planning events for National Police Week. And one of the smartest things that we could do was come together as one in what we call the National Police Week Committee. It made no sense having each one of the 3 organizations send out information to the survivors when it could go out in one neat package where they could read about everything going on in National Police Week.
The more Police Week and COPS membership grew, the more support the organization needed.
LEU chose C.O.P.S in 2009 because of their dedicated work on projects that directly help survivors, law enforcement officers, and families of law enforcement officers. Today, we have LEU members that participate in their hands-on programs as counselors, mentors, staff members, and we couldn't be happier for that.
The mission behind what Concerns of Police Survivors does is so important. This organization is actually one of the most important organizations out there for our law enforcement families.
I've had the opportunity to walk hundreds of miles with the families, co-workers, and significant others of fallen officers. I've heard many, many times the positive and sometimes life-changing differences that Concerns of Police Survivors provides.
Service is a calling, a lifelong dedication and commitment to helping others.
Your resilience echoes through generations, a legacy of hope amidst tragedy's shadow. Our unwavering support walks beside you, illuminating the path forward with empathy.
I love cops. I'm grateful to be part of their family.
We are happy to be here in celebration of C.O.P.S' 40-year anniversary.
Our hope is that you will look to us as a member of your support team.
And we are happy to support Concerns of Police Survivors' important mission of rebuilding shattered lives of our law enforcement fallen heroes.
And I proudly support Concerns of Police Survivors.
After nearly 30 years of service, C.O.P.S.'s co-founder and executive director emeritus stepped down, and the organization was faced with the nearly impossible task of replacing Susie Sawyer.
When Susie was retiring and we needed to find a new executive director, we launched a national search.
That search brought us to retiring Deputy Chief Diane Bernhard.
She just was very down to earth, open, and you could tell that she was caring. And you know, that's the piece that really, I think, makes the person in that role successful, because this is a different type of organization. You're dealing with people who are grieving.
Diane is a surviving coworker. her friend and coworker Molly Thomas Bowden was shot and killed in the line of duty in 2005. It was Molly's parents who introduced Diane to C.O.P.S.
And we got so much support out of the counselors and the C.O.P.S people at parents' retreat that, to tell you the truth, I felt special.
He pulled me aside and he said, Diane, he goes, I need to tell you about this thing that happened to me. And I said, what happened to you, Dave? And he said, I went to this retreat. He goes through this organization called C.O.P.S. And he told me after that, in that conversation in that hallway, he said, because of C.O.P.S, I think I'm going to be okay. And I remember thinking as I went to retire that I want to do something that could help people. And when I saw the opening for C.O.P.S, I knew exactly what it was because of that conversation with Dave Thomas.
And I called Susie Sawyer up and I told Susie, I said, well, I'm going to put a plug in for Diane. She'd be great. And Susie said, well, I think so too, but I got to let the board decide.
Diane and the National Board focused on growing C.O.P.S and expanding the offerings for survivors and law enforcement, while the number of survivors rapidly increased.
One of the things that we did very early on at C.O.P.S is we looked at what we were currently doing and where there were gaps of services, like what needs did survivors have that we weren't meeting yet.
More retreats were added to cover all survivorships, extra traumas of law enforcement training locations, a law enforcement wellness conference, and the Surviving to Thriving conference. Through times of negative opinions towards law enforcement, C.O.P.S worked with law enforcement partners to create Law Enforcement Appreciation Day.
The partnership with all of these organizations helped us grow into the organization that we are today, and it helps us ensure that every survivor can know about C.O.P.S and can get the help and the services that they need.
And it was that newfound level of awareness that helped C.O.P.S adapt quickly when the COVID pandemic hit, which brought the largest number of fallen officers since the inception of C.O.P.S and forced the postponement of National Police Week for the first time ever.
Everything changed. One of the things that I'm proud of just by leading the organization, keeping it moving forward. At that time, a lot of things were put on hold, and a lot of other organizations and other companies, they just didn't know how to react. They couldn't adapt fast enough.
As soon as survivors could safely gather again, a multi-year, combined National Police Weekend was planned, with more than 600 officers being honored in October 2021. Shortly after, the official criteria of line-of-duty death was expanded to include officers who die by suicide in certain circumstances.
Being able to adapt to the world changing around us is what has made C.O.P.S successful over an incredible 40 years. The mission of rebuilding shattered lives never has and never will waver.
C.O.P.S is probably the only organization that I know of that doesn't want to grow. But the reality is that is not our reality, and that we will continue to grow. And so our job now is to make sure that C.O.P.S is as healthy as it can be, that it's sustainable, that it will be around for survivors for as long as they need us, for the next 40 years or longer.
I truly believe that the strength of this organization is the survivors walking arm in arm, locking together, moving forward. And so it takes the whole body of this organization. It takes the chapters. It takes the national office. It takes the board. It takes everybody walking arm in arm.
And as a family, that we could continue to grow together in love and unity and to be strong. Even though we lost our loved one, we're going to always have them in our heart.
You know, there's a whole lot of people in the future that don't know that they need us. But guess what? We're going to be there for them.
I want to be there to help others. I want to be there to help the moms, the children, the siblings, the spouses. I want to be there for whoever needs me at any point in time, any day or night. I just want to be there.
We're not just here today. We're not just here tomorrow. We're here today, tomorrow, all day, any day, every day you need us.
My passion for helping others has grown, and my hope for the next 40 years is that it will continue growing, not only for me, but for other survivors. Together, we can make a difference.
Congratulations on 40 years, and here's to another 40 years.
Take my hand, and I'll pull you up, and we will be here for you forever.